Welcome to the Open-Hearted Podcast. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Open-Hearted Podcast. My name's Will Wheeler and I'm joined by my main man, Photon John. How's it going, brother?
Pretty good. I had a very good weekend. How about yourself?
Yeah, not too bad, man. I'm just trying to think. I think I just relaxed. I think it was a little bit sunny here in Sydney for like a day. I can't remember. But I just chilled out inside, didn't do too much at all. So I suppose that was good. Like I was saying, I woke up this morning and I'm like, man, I am due for a holiday. So I really hope I can have a holiday shortly. But what about yourself, mate? You said you had an actual pretty good one.
I played 2 shows, 2 nights in a row, and tore the roof off both nights. It was good.
Tore the roof off. So I'm assuming you didn't get paid because you had to repair the roof, eh?
Yeah, pay is to be confirmed.
Okay, nice. Well, look, awesome stuff, man. I think we're getting towards the end of the year here. Where, hey, I think this is like our 10th episode.
Yeah.
Hey, happy 10th episode, mate.
Yeah.
The funniest thing is we haven't even man, I've seen you face to face like this, but I haven't actually, seen you is in regards to being in your presence physically since we started this podcast, even for years.
Yeah. Well, we had that one time earlier this year or late last year, whenever it was.
Well, what do you mean? When did I see you?
We had a little boozy brunch.
We had a what?
We had a brunch up here.
When?
With Lutzer.
Oh my God, that's right. Oh my God. I completely forgot about that. Yes, around Christmas time.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that is so funny. And I suppose, you know what? In regards to what we're going to be going over today, this is probably a really good way to flow into this because we're talking about catching up with friends and talking about all that stuff. So, for those of you who didn't know, today what we're going to be covering is maintaining friendships in adulthood with neurodiversity. So Kev, I think speaking about when we've caught up last and all that type of stuff, I think this is fitting for what we're going to be covering today. So you ready to rock into this, my man?
And all roll.
Nice. So, I think the first thing, actually, before anything, if anyone's listening today, I'd highly recommend you to please subscribe, like, and follow our social media platforms. We've got some really awesome stuff there today. Or so far, and let's make this stuff happen. Feel free to join us. We've got some really cool stuff coming up in the way. Also, too, while we're at it, Sophia's watching in from Melbourne, and we might actually touch base with some cool stuff with Sophia shortly. We might talk more about that. Shazzy, have I pronounced your name right? Most of my enduring friendships are with ND people. Good stuff. And you know what? Especially with the Open-Hearted Podcast, we actually look forward to talking about some more stuff in regards to friendships and all that shortly. So, Shazzy, thank you so much for listening. And also, too, I've seen Shazzy commenting on a few of our things. So thank you so much for the support. We really appreciate it. But let's get into the first question here. In hindsight, how do you think your neurodiversity affected your attempts to make friends? Photon John, you want to go for the first one, my man?
I think we need more than an hour on this one.
Okay.
No, look, it's I've said it a lot. You know, I'm quite high functioning, so to speak, despite being high on the spectrum. That wasn't always the case. You know, the younger you go back, the weirder a kid I was. You know, the less I had learned, and I think in particular, I mean, I remember being really young in just grade one, and I was that kid who was walking around the playground by themselves with absolutely no one, and I was the weird child. And then I sort of started to learn some basics, but then it occurred to me that there were some deeper things that I didn't understand, and so I sort of had to learn that over time. And all of these things took me a lot longer to learn, and there were just things that other kids just instinctually understood, and some really basic stuff. But sort of once I got through the earlier years, and sort of into high school, I discovered music, and that gave me a common interest with people. So I had other friends who were learning to play guitar, or joining their first bands, anything like that. And that kind of gave me that. And although at that point, I then went through my teens and really had a lot of trouble there, because that's when I kind of understood all the basics. We had common interests. We had things that made people want to hang out with me on a regular basis. But that's when the really detailed, nuanced stuff came to light that I just, all my friends understood and I just didn't, and it took a lot of friend groups to learn that stuff. That took, the basics. It took me maybe until mid primary school to learn. The slightly deeper stuff than that took me, the latter half of high school. It took me all through high school and a little bit afterwards, that many years, to really sort of learn more nuanced stuff. Like, I had to bank a good memory of how, what not to say, what's appropriate, the appropriate responses to things. I sort of developed a small bank of what certain facial expressions meant. And just had to build that up over time. So it really wasn't.
That's a lot of stuff to take on. Do you know what I mean? Like, because you're having to think, okay, I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to do this. So would you burn out?
Yeah, a lot. I was very depressed. I was on antidepressants from about 12, 13 years old for many, many years. Happy to say I no longer need them. I don't recommend anyone coming off them if they still do need them. But
yeah, man, antidepressants are fun, man.
Yeah, but I took them for a long, long time, and eventually got to a place where I didn't need them so much. But it was through most of my 20s even. I was kind of getting better at it, but just going through friend group after friend group, because I kept messing up somehow. And the problem is, and we'll get, I think, into that a little later, but was the inability for me to understand where everyone else was coming from, and for them to even comprehend the reason I was arriving at certain conclusions or behaviors wasn't because of the reasons that they assumed in their head, being neurotypical people. The path that my brain took to get to whatever it was, was quite different. And that's what I really had trouble understanding. But at 25, I got an unofficial diagnosis. First specialist said to me, I believe you're on the spectrum. I didn't follow up with a proper diagnosis, as some people will know, until I was 41, but I kind of knew from that point. That's when I learned a bit more about myself and understood. I really think it's, even for the person who is neurodiverse, it's all about education. Life, it can help your friends succeed in being your friend, and vice versa. And then, through my 30s, I really, developed a lot of friends. And I know this will sort of parallel with a lot of neurotypical people's experiences in some ways. But again, I'll delve a little more into that a bit later.
Cool. But yeah, look, and I think it's so interesting to especially hear about, the pathway that you took is probably completely different to the pathway I took. You know what I mean? And that doesn't mean I'm better or you're better or you're worse, I'm worse. It's just interesting. What's that?
Different neurodiversities. For anyone listening who doesn't know, I'm autistic, and Will is dyslexic and ADHD.
Yeah. And the thing is, I think for me, and it's been interesting since I got older, I remember being, if I'm thinking back to preschool or even those early years, I was so shy. I didn't have this confidence. Like the person that you're listening to on here right now, I was definitely not that. It did take me a long time to build that up. And I think a big thing in regards to that was, finding myself, finding my tribe and the right people to hang around, all that. But I think for me in school, especially, I would start to make some friends and all that. But what I would find, especially when I think back to it, I would change friends a lot. It was like I would hang out with such and such for a while, and then I would ditch them and then go hang out with someone else and so forth, and all this different stuff. And when I think back to it now, it's so not strange, but I understand why I was like that. But also too, I think as well that I suppose I was a person who was liked, but I was probably never the most popular kid at school type of thing. Um, but I would sometimes hang around with a lot of really popular type of kids, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it was sort of like I had my fingers in a lot of different pies, if that makes sense. Like I would go hang out with some really well-known or popular kids, if that's what you want to call it. But then I would even go and hang out with, the square pegs, as well. And that didn't really bother me. It was just, I don't know, I would have that connection and really build. But what I would find is that when you're jumping ship all the time, people tend to, what I sort of got was that start to think that you're only using them for certain things and stuff like that. I remember even once I got older, I would do that. I'd go and hang out with some people from around the streets where I grew up. And then I'd go and hang out with people from school. And then I'd go hang back out with some of my friends around the streets. And they'd be like, oh, man, you're just using us and this and that. And I'm just like, what? I'm actually just happy to come and see us and hang out and all this type of stuff. And I think as I've gotten older, I've sort of identified that as well. But the thing is, what I've found since I've gotten older as well is that I now am probably more selective on who I want to maybe spend my time with, right? Like, we're hearing a lot about, I'm seeing a lot of things out there in regards to helping people make new friends and all that. And that's fantastic, right? But I'm going to a lot of these events and I'm just finding that I'm just not fitting in. I'm not I'm not what everyone else is trying to be type of thing. Not that they're trying to be, they're just being themselves. But I remember I went on like a Kentucky tour. Going back 7 or 8 years ago now. I can't remember off the top of my... Actually, it might even be 10 years. I can't even remember. But
before times.
What's that?
Definitely in the before times.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, my wife would be pretty angry if I went on a Kentucky tour now. but that's a whole nother story. And what I found was when I went on this Kentucky tour, I found it really difficult to find the right, I go and speak to a lot of people, but I just find that I just didn't fit in, and it was sort of, I don't know, I just found it really difficult because it was just like, I don't even know how to explain it, but I just felt like I was sort of an outsider, if that makes sense, where it seemed like all these other people, they were like fitted in with everyone else, and I was an outsider, so I didn't really matter type of thing. But in saying that, I do remember leaving the Kentucky tour, and a lot of people were like, "Oh my god, I need to get pictures with Will. Yeah, Will's the best." Right? And I'm thinking, "Oh my god, I didn't even think I was that awesome." You know what I mean? So it was really interesting to sort of understand that. And I suppose as well as getting older now, you start to become more selective with who you want to make friends with, and all that type of thing there. So definitely, yeah.
I would say there is one bit of connective tissue there, which was that in high school, at least by mid high school, I had the same thing where I would hang out with a bunch of different groups of people. But for me, it was more I would hang out with the people in those groups that were really into music, and just had those same interests as me. It was kind of like playing, like I said, like playing an instrument. If we're having a good morning, how are you conversation, you're having a good morning, how are you conversation. I'm playing the piano, and I had to learn how to play that song, and memory bank it, basically.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, because I think, especially towards the end of high school, that was probably where I really started to get involved with a lot of the wrong people for the wrong reasons. I was definitely getting involved with drugs. I was 18, so I was able to get alcohol, going to parties. So I think I was starting to hang out with a lot of the outcasts a lot of the time, if that's what you want to put it. But I was going in the wrong direction. But we might talk a little bit about that more shortly. But I suppose the thing is, what did you learn that changed things for you? So, what have you learned over this time that has changed things for you?
I was thinking in depth about this one earlier today, and I think if you're a neurodiverse person with a neurotypical friend and vice versa, it's sort of important to understand, you're not, your brains are fundamentally different. You're not going to be able to imagine the other person's experience, and so it becomes really important to listen. I think I've said on another podcast, you don't have to understand it. You just have to not be an asshat about it. You know what I mean? It's I sort of, I don't want to equate it too much to racism, because they're very different things, but it's sort of like, when I see that happening, I shut up and I listen and let them tell me what the problem is, because I don't know that experience, and I never could understand that experience. So I think, and it can end up in some real misunderstandings. I know, a lot of neurotypical people that I know sometimes try to understand what I tell them about my neurodiversity from a neurotypical logic kind of way, and they can't make it make sense. So they sort of fall back into these ruts of, oh, he's doing that. Well, if I did, and they're not thinking consciously, but they're subconsciously going, well, if I did that, it would be because of this motivation. It's like, no, my motivation is completely different. The path that my brain took to get to that point was completely different. So I really think just listening, and for neurodiverse people, understanding that they need to be listening, and you need to be explaining yourself as clearly as you can. And it's not, we can't blame them for that. They're not capable of fully understanding our thought patterns or anything. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Well, if you have a look here, Rich Moffat, I think I pronounced this. I think sometimes neurodistinct or neurodiverse, however you want to put it, are often negative about themselves and overthink it, when atypicals simply don't see it or notice behaviors short term. What are your thoughts on that, Kevin?
Some. I think blanket statements aren't, there's always exceptions to rules. But I think short term is the key thing there. I can walk up to you and seem completely fine in a pub for, a couple of hours, and then we might go see a movie and we might hang out for a little bit. But over time, you're going to start to notice.
All in the one night, eh?
No.
You buy me a drink first, mate.
Drink first, movie second, and but no, you will notice over time, and I've the friends I have been able to now maintain for a number of years, they're in no doubt, they understand. They have seen it over a while, and they start to see patterns that you can't see in the short term, which is that maybe I reacted slightly differently to how someone else would to something, or maybe they begin to understand, actually, Kevin behaves like that because of this reason, not this other reason which I would normally attach to that. You know what I mean?
Saying
Like they
that right.
over time as well, you know?
In saying that right, I sometimes, I don't know what it is, but and I could be completely wrong on this one here right now.
Yeah.
Sometimes I find with people who aren't like myself, sometimes they're not as forgiving as myself. Like, say if I was to lose my shit at someone and do something that maybe I saw was a little bit regrettable, I could like apologize and then I'd be happy to be friends with someone again. Do you know what I mean? Or vice versa, right? But there's been people that I've met in the past that just can't let that go. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? And I sometimes find within maybe the neurodiversity community, and don't get me wrong, it depends on what you do, of course. Maybe we're a little bit more forgiving sometimes. I don't know. Do you ever find that?
Yeah. It's happened a bit where if you know, unfortunately, you know, I hate to say it, but I'm going to misunderstand people at some point, and I might say something unintentionally hurtful, or you know, or react the wrong way to something, and it's just because my brain just worked that way, or it did, or in some cases, you know, when it's something to do with something I didn't pick up on, my brain just didn't work, you know, because that part of it doesn't work properly. But unfortunately, when people feel hurt, they sort of fall back into the applying neurotypical logic to what has happened, and they don't want to necessarily forgive or believe that you didn't mean to do that thing. But it's just a really unfortunate truth. It's, you know, the other thing, you know, to go back slightly to, you know, things that used to happen when we were younger is people would have real trouble understanding that I didn't understand that something was inappropriate, and then they just could not believe that I couldn't possibly, because to them it just makes immediate sense, right? But to me it was just like I didn't know, you know, but no one wants to try and understand that you could. But there's some really obvious things that I missed when I was younger, until I learned how to notice them when I was older. There's a good story I read a while back about this woman who wrote a book on being autistic, and she's talking about when she was a kid in the kitchen with her mum, and her mum's friend was there telling them about how their other friend, their daughter, I think, had died. And the little girl, being autistic, started smiling, and the mum's friend just flew off the handle, like, what the hell is wrong with this kid, you know? But she explained, well, in my head, I'm going, oh, okay, that's really sad. But then I started thinking about how, oh, if that didn't happen to me, and I get to hang out with my mum, and she still gets to have me. So she started smiling, right? And none of those emotions, none of those thoughts are emotions or thoughts that neurotypical people can't have. This is where it can get difficult for them to understand. It's the order of those thoughts. It's the way those thoughts came out. It's the path she took to arrive at that behavior. And I don't think it's specific to autism. I think if you have neurodiversity, your brain works differently, and it can express itself differently.
A really interesting way of looking at it, isn't it?
Yeah. But you know, the neurotypical person, without an understanding of that the girl was autistic, or really what autism was at that time, I think it was just got angry at her, and she was tried to explain, but she was like, no, that's not how thoughts work. You know, that's not how.
But do you know what I find, right, with myself? I think I sometimes blurt out things. Do you know what I mean? Which to me, it doesn't seem. And look, to tell you the truth, some of the things I blurt out aren't bad. Like, I remember I was at some event the other week, and it was sort of like a corporate thing. And don't get me wrong, we're probably a little bit loose after because it was the after party. So we'd had a few by that point, right? And I remember meeting this lady, and it was loud. It probably wasn't the best environment for for neurodistinct people, but I was there. I was having a good time. But it was loud. You had to like really yell to talk to people. And I remember meeting this lady, and she introduced herself, and I'm like, whoa, you can tell you've been talking to a lot of people. Your voice must be really sore. And I think she might have taken offense to that, because It wasn't sort of like, hi, how's it going? My name's Will or whatever. That was my first thing. Do you know what I mean? And it
Yeah.
was sort of like, I think that happens to me a lot. I just blurt things out. Not
Mm.
that I'm trying to be rude. And I wouldn't even say that that was being rude. But, that's just how I've always been. And maybe some people get offended. Because you know how like first impressions last? That
Mm.
saying, maybe people have taken that the wrong way or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. I've had instances where like I don't even, it doesn't even occur to me, but then I realize, oh, okay, I've just met this person and I've been talking to them about nothing but the Smashing Pumpkins for 2 hours. They're probably bored or annoyed at this point, and then people would think I was a bit weird, or it's common. Again, I hate blanket rules, but it is pretty common with autistic people because we find it so hard to emotionally connect, to use stories that relate back to ourselves to try to show connection. But neurotypical people rarely take it that way. They're just like, I'm trying to talk about this, and this person's talking about themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you know what? I think this is, I don't know what it is, but like I just find that I sometimes do get stuck talking about certain things because I love that topic
Yeah.
type of thing. It's interesting. But we should move on to the next part here. Choosing the right friends. Okay. And we sort of touched base on this a little bit, especially when I was a little bit younger, especially in high school. Definitely started to hang with that wrong crowd, all of that type of thing.
Yeah.
I think it can be very, very easy to slip into that because we see a lot of, neurodistinct people taking those routes because, they're maybe meeting people who are similar to them or whatever. What are your thoughts on based around this topic here?
Yeah, I mean, we both, when we were younger, found ourselves in drugs. I kind of a roundabout way found my way there because I got into music. So music was a very positive connective thing for me that allowed me to have friends. But when you're young, in the 90s, and you grow up with those rock star ideals that are kind of dated now. A lot of people tend to veer that way as they get a bit.
Well, I was the exact same, right?
Yeah.
I was the exact same. I was like, it was for me, it was probably like, and you'll probably laugh with this. It was like I could do something that I enjoyed doing, and it was a good way to like meet chicks. Do you know what I mean? Because they'd be like, "Oh my god, this guy's in a band," and blah 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 blah. That's just how like a young person probably thinks, right? But it was then. I don't know. It was just like grew from there. So we were into the bands, and then when you're in bands, a lot of people, there was a lot of access to a lot of parties and party drugs, and do you know what I mean? It just was very acceptable in that culture.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it was the first thing that got me there was, here I am talking about Smashing Pumpkins again, but it was that band in particular. I remember I heard that album Melancholy. Anyone who hasn't heard it, go out and listen to it because it's a double album. There's so many different songs, so many different emotions, and I'd never felt like I connected with anyone emotionally before until I heard that album. I was like, this guy gets it, right? And then I realized that however bad I was at expressing my emotions verbally through song, I was really good at it, and I could write good songs, and people liked the music that I was making, and so I felt like I was finally actually connecting with other human beings through that. But then, yeah, again, it's just that scene. You drugs end up being around, and people make poor choices, and gigs happen, and there's people sort of everywhere. But so I experienced the same things from a slightly different angle.
But like the thing was, what I sort of found was that when you're in that type of culture, because it is a culture, it's very artistic, which is all. And to tell you the truth, the best thing about like the arts and music culture is the art. The art and music that comes out of it. There's some really talented people, and that's what's so beautiful about it, right? But, you know, I suppose the thing that I was what I would sort of get caught up with is you start to meet people for the wrong reasons. So I was then, you know, I don't know, you would meet someone because they were able to score you good drugs, or you met someone because they like to party as much as you did, or little things like that. And at the time, and don't get me wrong, these people that I would meet in that era of my life, they weren't bad people. They were lovely people, you know. You're talking, and so you wouldn't be like, "Hey, look, this is a bad person." But just in regards to making certain choices, it can be, you know, not the best for your, say, career. Moving forward, you know, I think the biggest thing with myself was breaking free of a lot of people who were my past. And it was amazing to see how much you actually change once you're able to break free from that. But in saying that, being able to, and you know, my brother went through the exact same thing before he met his wife, and being able to try and break that, but even trying to tell that to younger kids who are growing up today, you know, you can't, you know, it's, you almost have to experience it to learn that, hey, look, this isn't the right thing, you know, little things like that.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, different genres and different eras, you know, romanticized certain lifestyles. In the 90s, it was heroin. The 80s, it was cocaine. You know, hippies and hip hop, it was weed. You know, it's all techno and that kind of stuff. And you know, for me personally, that's when I fell into intravenous drug use, which was very, very serious. And unfortunately, music kind of led me down that path a little. Let's not ban music, you know. I just made very bad choices.
But yeah, totally. But look, I think probably the biggest thing for me that was changed me was when I started getting into business, my career, because it was really interesting with my career, for example. I was starting to really develop even when I was in that stage of my life. I was starting to do some really good things, right? But on the weekend, I'd still get wasted, be taking LSD, ecstasy, all of that type of stuff. And then rolling back into work and nailing it, right? And
Right.
I would win awards for things, all of this stuff. And I think I got to a point in my life I was like, oh my, because people are like, man, you're such a loose dude, you know. How the hell do you do all this stuff? And I used to think, yeah, hell yeah, man, I can live twice, I can do all of this stuff, you know. But what I really found was that it once I started to really want to get into business, and when you're starting a business, you can't party and want to build something like what I'm trying to build, right? Because you do have to be focused. You've got to have a lot of things. And, attending a lot of, what were they like? I'd see it go to a lot of motivational speeches and all that. I would see a lot of people who had gone through the exact same thing. And they're like, look, you cannot run a business and go out and party hardcore on the weekend and all of that type of stuff, you know? And once I kicked all of that stuff, it was amazing to see how much more my career actually really blossomed. But the problem I then found was I then went through a really deep depression of loneliness because the people who I used to hang out with, they were no longer there because I wasn't part of that lifestyle anymore. So I was lost. I didn't have anyone around. So my depression went right down. And it can be really easy to run back because it's like, I need those people, you know. So to tell you the truth, the hardest thing was actually pulling away from that. But trying to find new friends again has probably been the hardest thing. And it's still really difficult today. I've got
Yeah.
my wife who's such an awesome person. And, it's we still struggle to make those friendships and maintain a lot of those friendships, because we are so different now. But how about yourself, Kev? How have you been able to maintain some friendships in adulthood?
Well, it does begin, like we said, with choosing the right people. If you're not going to take my autism seriously, and believe me when I explain it to you, and let's be clear here, there are people who make excuses for things using neurodiversity. We're not a perfect community of people. These things happen sometimes, but if it's just because you're failing to take the time to gain a little bit of understanding and educate yourself on, how this works to the best of your ability. Again, we've said you're never going to fully understand each other's brains, but if you're willing to make that effort, then I'm willing to make that effort. Something I've had to learn is if I am going to, mess up here and there, I need to be ready to apologize right away and say, I apologize. Accept responsibility for your behavior, regardless of why it happened. If you've behaved in a way that's hurt someone's feelings or that was just poor, you got to apologize for it, and you got to own up to it and just be an adult about that. But you also need a receptive partner in that friendship. Someone who is willing to hear you out, someone who is willing to try and make the effort to get to understand that you are a little different. And then from there, really, for me, it was just accumulated knowledge on how to human. Because that just instinctively didn't come to me. I had to build it up over time. In a lot of ways, though, sometimes neurodiversity can cause you to have a slightly more methodical and deeper understanding of human behavior in some ways, because you have to study it deeply to learn how to function.
You know what, right? That's actually such a good point you make there, because I think that's almost how I'm very observant of the people I hang around now. I'm very observant of how I'm feeling when I'm around certain people. Do you know what I mean? Now, I've got a lot of neurodistinct friends, but I'm actually got a fair few like neurotypical friends as well. And you would say that those people are probably, they're more those caring type of people, where back in the day I'd hang out with people because, people thought they were cool. And a lot of those people wouldn't treat me the way I wanted to be treated a lot of the time, if that makes sense. So I'm more selective on who to probably be friends with these days. And I can identify that really easy. I don't know if you're the same.
Yeah. Again, it's like the same. See, this is probably why we're friends, because we end up in the same place, but slightly different ways. The emotional instinct that makes people behave in the way they behave, I'm pretty blind to that, unless I've learned how that works, right? But that also kind of affords me in a lot of situations, like friends who might be a couple who are fighting or whatever, to sort of see straight through all the emotional stuff that's blinding them to what the real problem is. And I have actually been able to help friends in that sense, and I think it's important that you do that sort of stuff, which leads really nicely into our next section, which is the importance of making an effort.
Okay, so do you want to maybe take off with that one there, and then I can come in on it?
Yeah. Most neurodiversities are, in my experience with the people that I've met, and we've met a few, probably you far more than me, Will, but anxiety tends to come with the territory. And so making this effort and getting out of the house and doing these things can be pretty terrifying. But the benefits just far outweigh it. And I know for myself, and I know this won't work for everyone, but for myself, exposure therapy was the way to get through it. There's an interesting artistic expression of it that happens with me on stage when I'm singing. If I'm jumping into the crowd and jumping around and dancing with them, or crowd surfing or something, it's not because I'm feeling confident. It's because I'm feeling anxious as hell. And when I feel that way, I'm like, all right, I've just got to literally dive in. And then it's too much. You know what I mean? It's too much for my brain to be worried about it anymore. I'm just there. And that can happen in more subtle ways too. You know, I used to have such bad anxiety some days that I couldn't get out of bed, but I realized if I just made myself get up and walk out the door and go to the shop or whatever, or go see a friend, you know, it got better. So I think that in terms of, you know, the initial effort that it takes to go and make friends, you need to make that effort. In terms of having friends and maintaining a friendship, again, I can only speak from my own experience, but I would say at the very least, autistic people can tend to be a little, because you're trying to do that telling stories about yourself to connect thing that you do, but you've got to really remind yourself consciously to take an interest in your friends and their lives and ask them about it, and don't let the conversations all be about that, and help where you can. You know, you might you know, a lot of autistic people or just neurodiverse people in general who have a way of looking at things that neurotypical people don't, might have really valuable advice about a situation in their life, and be able to offer them a perspective that they wouldn't get otherwise. So yeah, I really try, but it gets hard, you know, because being autistic, I have trouble. Well, it's not normal for autistic, but it happens sometimes. Is you can have trouble driving. So there's public transport issues if people live a long way away, and you know, I have to really prepare myself to go out and socialize in that way. You know, if I'm going to go that long, I'm going to have to stay the night, and then I need a night that I can stay the night. It takes a lot of organizing, and so I need to communicate with people really clearly that I haven't seen you in a while. It's not about that. It's just that it's a big mental task. It's a big mental.
So that's why you haven't come down and visited me in Sydney yet, eh, mate?
Yeah. Good. I have friends in Ipswich, and I feel really bad. They've got a new baby. I need to go out more and see them. But you know, I mean, there's also the fact for me that I've got the business to run. I've got the band playing all the time, and you know, I've got, you know, my family to look after as well, plus the travel time out there. So it needs to be say a weekend where I've got nothing on the day that I got to go out there. You know.
Do you know what? Right, I'm sometimes a little bit the opposite. Okay, so sometimes for me, I love. What's the word? Spontaneous. That's it. Like, is that the word I'm looking for? Like spontaneously, like on this. Is that the word I'm looking for?
Yes.
So like just being able to go. So for example, let's say I'm around the corner and then call and you go, "Hey Kev, what are you doing? Let's catch up for a beer." And you're like, "Yeah, all right." Do you know what I mean?
I mean, yes, but I wouldn't say yes.
Yeah. But that's just how I sometimes like being, where trying to organize something. Yeah, I can organize things and I love that. But sometimes the whole, like, when it gets to that day, it can be like, oh crap, I don't think I feel like it now. Do you know what I mean? Like it's such a strange feeling that I don't know, like sometimes just doing that off the bat works best for me.
Yeah, well that is I don't want to stereotype, but that is pretty sort of classic ADHD kind of stuff. You know?
Yeah, probably. Hey,
I'll do that today now. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
No,
and I think that's hard for me because I know a lot of, and especially as you get older, because you can't just do that because people have families or whatever, and they have to have that. Where for me, back when I was younger, especially, the best nights were the ones that were just off the cuff, you know. It's a little bit different now, but even now, my wife and I sometimes we'll just randomly go, "Hey, let's go here," and we'll do it, and we'll have a really good afternoon. It's really strange. That's just how I roll. So it sort of doesn't work that well, type of thing, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does with the right people. Again, it comes down to the right friends. But you know, just because some people can't quite fit in with the way I am or the way you are, doesn't mean they're necessarily the wrong choice for friends. It just means you're going to approach it differently.
Yeah, totally. And you know what? I've learned that I probably don't see those friends as much anymore. And the ones who do just randomly call out of the blue, like get this right. Sometimes I'll see someone post something up on Facebook, and they're like, "Oh, down at the such and such having they'll show a burger or something like that," and it's like, "Hey, what are you guys up to?" It's like, "Yeah, just down there. Oh, we might come down." Do you know what I mean? That works really well for me, and that's often happened.
In
But
that in that situation, I'd be going, "Oh, they should have invited me to. I should have told them that I would have liked to come to that, so they could have invited me with lots of notice. And now I'm gonna eat that food to sit and eat alone in my house."
yeah. You Uber Eats it. Hey, I might Uber Eats from that hotel, and then you might be able to video chat with them. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. But yeah, so I think that's sort of been where, I do struggle with those things, because sometimes I do just love, and it's almost the same in business. I'm very much about some people in business I've learned they've got to have it planned to the T, where I'm very much trial and error. Where I'm like, "Hey, let's try this," rather than where some people are like, "Oh, no, you can't do that. Can't do that," or "You can't do that." It's like, why the F not?
Yeah. Well, the next point I want to say comes into the next point, which is, what are the challenges? If you're good to get into that.
Yeah, man, go for it.
I think a lot of people who know me, and as I don't communicate a lot of this. I probably should communicate it more. Everything I do is meticulously planned. And I need time, and I also have routines.
Well, I know that because whenever I've missed something in a meeting, I have to plan when I can quickly ask you a short question.
Yeah. Well, because
and it's funny because that almost eats me away, because I'm like, "Oh,
the
now I've got to."
opposite,
So I try to make sure I get everything in our meetings.
Yeah, no, socializing has to be meticulously planned, and it can only be certain amounts before I start to burn out. There's also things like, okay, I'm going to have to catch a train. I'm going to have to mentally prepare myself for that. I'm maybe going to have a few drinks with that person. Okay, I know I'm probably going to have a bit of anxiety the day after, so I need to mentally make sure I have nothing planned for the next day if I'm going to plan to go see them. And there's just all this other stuff. I need to get up in the morning. I need to do my workout. I need to do all my other routines that keep me sane. So there's really a lot going on in the background. It's kind of like what I said before, where I'm having a good morning conversation with someone. How's the weather? And it's no effort for them. My brain is going at 1,000,000 miles an hour just to get through that conversation. So there's a lot going on mentally for me, and I think to any neurotypical people out there hearing this, I think a really important point to make is that a lot of this we do not just because we're weird, but if you're a bit older and you have a bit of a better understanding of your brain, it's to preserve your mental health. Learning to say no for me was hard, because I wanted to please everyone, because it was really hard for me to please anyone, and it was really hard for me to have friends. And I just started saying yes to everything, to things that made me uncomfortable. And then, in my especially in my 30s, I just started to go through these massive depression spirals. But I have more and more friends. Why am I getting more and more depressed? And it was because I was doing more than was healthy for me to give. I struggle at the end of the day. I struggle to socialize. It burns me out. And because it's a lot of effort. It's a lot more effort for me to have a simple conversation than most people. And come away from that with them not going, "He's a bloody weirdo." You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you know what? I think for me, I'm the opposite. I get depressed when I can't socialize. I need that social interaction. This is the thing. My wife, her shifts have just changed. She's now back on night shift, so I'm spending a lot of time at home. And I've noticed this week that or the last couple of weeks, my depression has just been playing up a little bit.
Yeah,
So, it's little things that I'm like, okay, well, and this is another thing. It's like, okay, well, do I try and find something to do in an evening? Like, yeah, I could go for a walk, but I'm walking by myself. Should I go take up a sport? Yeah, I could go take up a sport, but the sports that are offering, I don't like them. You know what I mean? I could go to the gym, but who the hell do I go to the gym with? I don't know anyone. Little things like that. So it's really, really difficult. And I think that's why I come home from work and then I'm back into work again. Like, for example, once we get off here, I'm going to be working on that pitch deck I was telling you about. You know what I mean? So that will keep.
I've noticed, for instance, if for some reason I can't make a meeting or whatever, you'll be like, well, how about I just do this in the meantime? And I know that's because it gives you something to do.
Yeah. And I think as well, when we first started, like, having meetings and trying to get the podcast happening, trying to get the app happening and having regular meetings. And I think there was a few times where you're like, okay, well, let's just do this. And then I was sitting there ripping my hair out, not pissed off with you or anything, but I was like, I've got to do more. And I even had a chat with you and I said, look, man, I just can't, do this and then wait. I have to. So, we've sort of done it now that I just go off and, talk to potential investors or, do whatever and then go, look, this is what I've done. And you're probably thinking, holy crap, man, how the hell's this dude done this?
But then I tend to, this is, we've spoken about before, why our strengths work well together, because then I sort of come in and pull it all together into an organized list and we think about it methodically, and then we figure out a way forward,
Yeah, totally.
Like that. But back to the importance of making effort. I do that in this friendship. There are some days where even though I kind of would prefer to not socialize, even just online in an online meeting, I do it. I'm never going to, it's like you never should do anything for a friendship beyond what you're capable of at the expense of your mental health. But if you think you can just give it a little extra, I think that's good advice.
And do you know what? Like in all that, in saying that, you're right. So, I'm the same at times. There's times when I'll get home and I'll be like, and this isn't like a dig at you. I'm like, oh man, I got to have that meeting. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, I've got to do it because we're working towards something bigger. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, well, as soon as even like the podcast today, like my depression isn't the best at the moment, but I've been able to go, okay, this podcast, we're starting to get traction. People are really starting to comment, and people are stopping us in the street and saying how they've really enjoyed the podcast and stuff like that, So it's like, this is an hour of my time where I can just do this, and then afterwards I can chill. And then we get to release this other cool our next podcast up on our social media platform. So it's not that difficult if that makes sense.
Yeah. Perspective is really important. I was similar about today's one. A, I'm a little bit sick, slightly sore chest, but B, I did a lot of work today and a lot of having to deal with people, and the time was coming up like, I could really just do with playing some video games for like the next 6 hours and just decompressing. But yeah,
I'm sort of glad we do it every fortnight, but right?
Yeah. It's an hour of my time, and it's totally worth it. And friendships can be the same, And
I think the thing,
often, but maybe just go spend an hour, have lunch with your friend, and maintaining that friendship.
Yeah, totally. And I think the thing, especially like we're talking about purpose, right? Meeting up with your friends, the purpose of that could be potentially for your mental health and potentially your friends' mental health. Because, when people reach out to me and say, hey, man, do you want to catch up? I'm like, hell yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's such a good feeling, and it's good for my mental health, right?
Yeah.
But with the podcast especially, like we said, there's times where I could be like, I can't be stuffed today. For one, I know if we start getting into that mindset of going, oh, let's not do this one this week, then the next one might be the same. Well, do you know what I mean? So trying to stick to that helps.
I mean, at least on Facebook, there's a few thousand people following us now. There's going to be people going, "Where are they?" But
yeah, totally.
But I think we've talked a lot today about, and it can be easy to sort of fall into this thing, being a neurodiverse person, about neurotypical people don't understand this and that, and I'd like them to understand me better. It's really important to explain, and I think we should give a shout out to all the neurotypical people out there who are friends with neurodiverse
Hell
people.
yeah, man.
And tell all the neurodiverse people who are friends with them, they get depressed, they get anxious, they have the problems. Again, neurodiversity is a difference. It's not not necessarily an illness. It's your brain works a bit differently. You can still have the same emotions, and they can have the same as you. So understand that you might need to be there for them in that sense as well.
Yeah, totally. I think it's a two-way street, 100%. And, I think while we're on that topic, it actually makes really good sense to flow into the next one in regards to open-hearted meetups. And so a big thing that myself and Kevin and a really good friend of mine, Sophia, is coming on board to help us with this is, we're really looking at trying to start doing some meetup groups in Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane. That's just because we're all from there. But we really want to start trying to do some events where people like ourselves or similar can come to. They're probably, we're mindful of maybe what some people may struggle with. Not just going, hey, let's have a meetup in a really busy bar or something like that, but really having an understanding of connecting people with people similar to yourself, or even people, like we said, neurotypical people who are cool and really open to hanging with people like ourselves and, want to learn about us. Because I think one of the things I've learned about, especially in business and really trying to help create neuro-inclusive workplaces. Neuro-inclusive workplaces aren't just about the neurodistinct people. It's actually about everyone, and having an understanding about that person, and that person may be completely different. And even as a neurodistinct person, having an understanding about how someone who's different from you is definitely heaps important. Like Kevin, you and I are both neurodistinct, but we've learned a hell of a lot from each other and the differences we have compared to each other, and the similarities, if that makes sense as well. And even in neurotypical people, it's the same type of thing. They've got differences and there's similarities. Do you know what I mean?
We're not aliens.
Hell no, man. Hell no. And this is where sometimes within the neurodiversity community, I'm going to say this right here. Sometimes I've seen some people really, it's almost attacking like neurotypical people. And it's like, nah. Step back from that. Let's embrace these people. Let's educate people, Why not? If I could learn from, say, a neurotypical person what it is they struggle to get from me, hell yeah. Do you know what I mean? Because then I can work in to build that better relationship and so forth.
And education is where it's at. Education and exposure. I don't know. I mean, I don't really care. I don't know if this is the first time I've said this on the podcast, but I'm not a straight man, and I'm 41 years old. I've seen how far that conversation has come since I was a little kid. And it was all education and exposure, understanding that they're just people that are a bit different, and slowly educating the general populace. And a lot of people, they would just, I don't even want to use the word ignorant, because they're not like ignorant human beings. They just didn't have an education. And once they got it, that changed. That changed the whole of society. I mean, you look at where we're at now compared to the early 90s. We probably don't have time to go through and explain it, but you know, and I think this is just a process, and it's starting to come out into the light, and it will take some time.
Totally, my man. And I think by, you know, we'll talk more about our events coming up shortly, and we'll probably have more posted up on our social media pages. So definitely stay tuned for that. But, you know, let's wrap this up. We've hit the hour mark there. So what are some recommendations based on our experiences? Kev, what do you reckon, my man?
I reckon we've made quite a few, but you know, I think if I could be meta for a second, I'd say be open-hearted, both the neurodiverse people and the neurodistinct people, to each other. Listen, learn, and make an effort, and try to. You can't understand each other's brains, but you can certainly try to create a reality between the two of you that works for the both of you.
Yeah, totally. I think, yeah, and it's a bit of a hard one because I think the biggest thing that's helped me is being open about, like you said, being open-hearted. And this is the whole thing about this podcast and everything we're working towards is being open about who I am, what I struggle with, what my strengths are. And sometimes I think that plays in your favor because, you know, and we've even spoken about this, right? I'm very open about certain things. And if people don't like that about me, great. See you later. There's the door. Don't let it hit you on the way out. I'm totally cool with that.
And it's not necessarily that they've, you know, they're bad people all the time. You know, it's just they can't get it. I don't even hate on anyone who doesn't like everything about me. It's just they just don't get it, and you don't have time for that. You don't, you know, as a neurodiverse person, you need people in your life who will make the time to understand you and give you that minimum level of education that they need for themselves to make this a functioning relationship, and vice versa.
And that's the thing. I think the biggest thing that I've found is when I was able to be myself, that was when the real magic started to happen. I don't know about yourself, Kev, but was when things changed for me.
My main friends, Brian and Doorman and Hardiman, they bloody get me, and they really, and we have exactly the sort of relationship that I've been sort of explaining to you. Like they're my best friends, and that friend group is tight as hell. And whether neurodiversity or not, we all make all of those efforts that I explained earlier towards each other. I feel as much as we can. Yeah.
Awesome, my man. I can't think of too much more. We've had some really great comments coming up on the screen today. So thank you so much for everyone who has listened in, has, you know, been a part of the podcast today. It's been really awesome. And look, you know, if there's other stuff you want to talk about or you think you might have something cool to share on the podcast, please reach out to us. We're always looking for new people to come on and speak with us. Besides that, Kev, was there anything else you wanted to share?
No, just thanks to everyone for coming in, and I'm enjoying watching the audience grow.
Yeah, totally. It's so surprising, isn't it? And we knew that was going to happen. It just takes time, you know. But if you haven't already done so, please subscribe, like, and follow our social media pages. But besides that, thank you so much for listening. My name's Will Wheeler with my main man, Photon John, and you're listening to the Open Hearted Podcast. Till next time.